Positive Lens podcast. I'm your host, Scott T. Each week, we will bring you positive law enforcement news stories from across the globe, shared by departments and citizens like yourself. In our Getting to Know Your Local Leo segment, we will speak with a member of the law enforcement community about everyday life and most things non-law enforcement, as we hope to adjust your focus so you see that members of your local law enforcement community are not much different than you and me.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 34, Getting to Know Your Local Leo, with Police Commander Eric Tung, who served in a department in Western Washington, close to Seattle. He's also the founder and host of the Blue Grit Radio podcast, writes for police publications, and speaks on first responder wellness. In this episode, we learn what it was like growing up as a stereotypical Asian American kid after winning the birth lottery. We also dive into a raw and honest discussion regarding his dad, growing up in a disjointed home, and their tenuous to non-existent relationship before personal growth sets in prior to his dad passing. He also shared with us the importance of the diversity of thought, his unexpected marriage proposal, and the importance of health and wellness, where you can live the life you want the best way you want to live it. Let's get started. Please welcome to the Your Positive Lens podcast, Police Commander Eric Tung.
Hey,
Good morning,
Scott,
Eric. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For those who are unfamiliar with the different demographics and setup of Washington, can you provide us a little information about the department you serve there close to Seattle?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Western Washington, as Scott said. So our department's a pretty good sized one, but it's really mid-sized, I think, in the scope of the nation. About 140,000 population. Our department is slated for 170 officers. So it's kind of that sweet spot where you know names and faces of those you're working with. At the same time, there are lots of opportunities, and that is what kind of drew me in the first place. Pretty close to 18 years of time served for me at the department. It's a very diverse population. I think our school district has the most languages spoken, potentially nationally, is a statistic I'd heard before. And what really drew me was like the need. I was testing around and learning about different communities and different cities, and for sure, it was the type of demographic where there was pretty significant like various crime. There was gang issues, there was a lot of drugs, and there still are. And so in a lot of ways, like I wanted to do quote unquote the real deal. And so in my testing and hiring process, that's what led me to the department, and really the people I met just really resonated with me that were doing the job, and I've been here ever since.
And you've rose the ranks quite quickly in your tenure as well, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. It doesn't feel that quick in some ways, and the other times, I think, like most people say, it does feel like the blink of an eye, and in some strange version of that.
But I will say, they mentioned 170 officers, I think you said, right? That 170 is a sweet spot, and a population about 140. So that's a pretty good ratio, though, for officers to community, which I think also helps, like you said, not just the names of the people in your department, but building relationships with the community you serve.
Yeah, it's actually, we are in Washington, the lowest per capita in the nation. I think that includes DC, as far as just like the ratio of cops. And then we are, where I work is actually quite a bit lower than the Washington numbers. I think we're toward the bottom as far as ratios. So we do feel strapped. We are running around pretty intensely at times, whether it's patrol or just cases stacking up on detectives' desks. I've had colleagues through the years from different parts of the country. Maybe I've known them professionally and they moved, or just people through the project that have actually shared in a smaller agency. They're like, I'm a detective. I'm kind of waiting. Sounds bad, but I'm kind of waiting for something to happen. I'm like, oh my gosh, you cannot let other people in like busy municipalities or districts hear that. They'll lose their minds, because it is triage. Like a lot of times in policing, sadly, there's a lot of victims. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of crime, but you got to pick and choose what you're doing. And that sometimes that's predicated on prosecutors too. Like they got to pick and choose what they're doing. So it is I appreciate the connection to community, yeah, but we are a bit under, and so for those like wanting more connection and more attention, like you can only do so much with what you have.
That is true. Taking us back to the very beginning. You're in law enforcement, like I said, 18 years, but a little more about yourself. Where you're born, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Memphis. I was born there. My parents both immigrated from China and Taiwan, and my story is started as like a pretty traditional, stereotypical like Asian American kid. I was raised with those types of priorities, like hugely into academics, but also into respect, right? So respect for your elders, respect for authority, and so I always had a deep reverence for those that served. I have an uncle that was in like the Taiwanese Marines, and so that was a figure from a distance that I always looked up to in a way that was unique to anyone else in my family. At the same time, those things weren't really valued in my family structure. They're oftentimes pretty frowned upon in the culture that my family came up in, where it was all about sacrifice and pushing yourself in school so that you could provide more. But more for my culture, my experience was usually financial security and stability of work, right? So that's where you get the things like a huge push towards medicine, computer science, tech, like law. These things are things that people always need, and it requires a lot of academic prowess and hard work to get there. And so those are the things I was pushed in. Although like truly, in the course of my childhood and adolescence, like none of them really resonate with me. But I just try to take that on. So a little bit long-winded, but in high school and college is where I truly found that those were not the things for me. I just wasn't passionate about them. I wasn't driven towards them. I always was interested in things like junior ROTC or the ROTC program. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and that hit me in a different way too. And, like most people can remember where they were at 9/11 if they were alive, and now we have a lot of adults that can't, which is kind of striking too.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think back that there are folks who are not even born yet that we interact with.
Yeah, absolutely. So all to say that, when I was in college and I was seeing, I was going to the University of Washington in Seattle, and I was seeing a lot of crime, like upfront and personal. I was doing the college painting, franchise thing and working hard and helping pay for bills and doing all that and being productive, and then having my car or my work truck, just an old Toyota with nothing of value, right, get broken into like 3 times. It was also the kind of situation where it was nothing like it is these days with people in crisis and openly using narcotics all over the place. It's not like it was, or it wasn't like that that bad, but it was pretty bad. So it just really shows where we've gone in different cities. But it was a place that you definitely needed to recognize some degree of like chivalry and like looking out for other people, walking your friends home, just because it wasn't a safe community just to walk about in the evening. And then even things like, during a break in my fraternity, an unknown person like tried to light the house on fire and actually did a pretty good job, like lighting up the whole side of the house. It damaged a few bedrooms, but there were a handful of us in there during that break, and we had to evacuate like in the middle of the night, wake up to fire alarms and to some arsonist pouring gasoline all over the side of the house. So like pretty legit, not an accident. So all to say, like these things kind of like invigorated this frustration of like what's going on out here and wanting to do something about it. And so growing up as a really shy, reserved kid, it probably sounded kind of ridiculous to myself, but also others that knew me. But I was like, why not? Like now is the time. I have my youth, I have my health. I'm just going to throw myself at this. I'm a pretty okay, smart guy, so like I can figure it out, right? And then I just dove in, and there weren't the resources that there are now, which is a lot of why I try to provide those resources on my own content, on kind of meet the people that are where I was at, in their journey. But I really threw myself at not just policing, but firefighting as well. And so going and like buying this huge book on firefighter testing and, kind of running up and down the stairs of my fraternity with some weights in my backpack, like all these things to prep up for either career. Fast forward, fire didn't want me, even though I tested way better. And so police was like the way, right? It was, I think, in a lot of ways where I needed to land. In that summer, doing oral boards and struggling through them like a lot of people do, but then hitting a groove and figuring out my rhythm and what they're looking for and how I could best show up, which is also what I, share a lot about as well. So that summer I got picked up by my agency, and I've been there since.
So let me ask you, we'll go back to a couple things. Memphis to Washington, that's a big change of scenery.
Yeah.
What led from the move from Washington, to Washington from Memphis?
Yeah, a lot of people actually moved to the Northwest. I mean, especially, back then in the 90s because of opportunities. Like it wasn't quite as developed as it is now, excuse me. But like the Seattle area and like the surrounding suburbs, now there's hardly anywhere to build, and it's almost like this like Silicon Valley kind of situation that looks like it's following where the housing is just out of control as far as like prices. But it was really working schools. I mean, I was slated. It was following parents' work opportunities and recognizing that the public school system I was in Memphis, we were hearing incidents at the middle school of kids fighting and bringing knives to school, and there were metal detectors and all this stuff, which kind of jarred my family, understandably. So a lot of it was just to get like a better setting. My dad's side also, like I had quite a bit of family in the Vancouver, BC area, so it was close to that. And my father's father was alive at the time, so to get closer to him. So there were a couple things that lined up, and I mean, I'm happy it happened. Like the Pacific Northwest, as it is known to be wet at times, but it's absolutely a great place to raise a family and access to nature and lots of awesome things.
Yeah, there is a lot actually up there. I haven't been up there myself, but I know individuals who have lived there and individuals who even want to move there. And it's funny because one of them wants to move there because of the wetness. They actually prefer that climate. And usually the opposite of what I hear from folks.
Yeah. Come between July and September, like our kind of perfect, not too hot summer goes all the way through the expanse of September, which is a little bit different than some places, but that is the ideal time to come.
All right, excellent. And now you mentioned academically as a child you were pushed. What were the areas you did excel in, even though it wasn't your wheelhouse of necessary medicine, computer science, microchips, but what was your wheelhouse? Where were you strong at?
Yeah, early on, not to sound a certain way, but I was strong at everything. History to science to math. And then as I got older, for sure the math like dropped off. I think it was just not having a passion for it, which is like stereotypical. That's the thing that a lot of Asian Americans or Asians like care about the most, because that's the hard science that's going to get you those awesome degrees and jobs. But it is interesting looking back, like even the things that required creativity, I really excelled at, like writing and language arts, that kind of stuff. And I did love those things. I was a really artistic kid, and I do have an artistic bone in my body. And so I think in some ways when that creativity was suppressed, trying to find other things, I think, in a strange way, like doing this crazy thing like policing was a different way to express creativity. It's not something we often get to utilize creativity in, or it's kind of lost on us. But I think that when cops are able to actually tap into creativity, that's when you really get some amazing problem solving, whether it's community policing or just working a case or taking an angle, looking at an investigation, or recruiting. Like that was where, an assignment I worked in relatively recently, a couple years ago, and just thinking outside the box and just throwing everything you could at the wall in 2021 when it seemed like it was dismal. I mean, we found a lot of success, so it was really scary, but also really exciting to kind of utilize that creativity.
Yeah, and I think that's a key part of it, because many times the path is you study criminal justice, you go into law enforcement. And if we just use that as a generic example, everybody getting hired is coming in with the same mindset. But when you bring individuals in from different either cultural backgrounds or, like I said, different left brain, right brain, now you, like I said, approach a case, whatever it is, with a different way of thinking. So you see angles that someone else doesn't see just because we think differently.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about diversity and all that, I think that's also a key component of it. And I know when I got into the financial industry years ago, you had individuals from all different backgrounds. And it's not because everyone was speaking the same business language. People were, again, approaching problems, approaching issues with a different way of thinking, and it made us stronger, I believe.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like even prior to recruiting, like I knew a lot of people that came into the department from different careers, right? Second career or just wanting a shift. We had people coming from teaching, and that one might seem more obvious to some, and then others, like I can think of a guy that's been in the job for quite a while, but he came from, the financial industry. And you'd think maybe off the cuff, you're like, okay, cool, yeah, he can look at like fraud and he can look at all these like analytical things. And that wasn't actually his gift at all. His gift was like talking to people, but he would go from this totally different angle, really like bring them down because he would talk about these high stress types of things with people like their finances and mortgages and packages but he would just really just make it about people. And then you just saw how his brain worked very differently, and that diversity of thought is such a underutilized, I think, focus. I think especially with the last few recent years when people talk about diversity in policing, it gets all sorts of like politicized responses. But really, it's like we serve everybody. Like our amazing nation is filled with every type of person, background, etc., but also personality and ways that they think. It's like, why would you not want as much of that as practical, especially representative of your community? Because you are going to have the most fleshed out team, right? We cannot have a department full of quarterbacks or offensive linemen. There's a reason why all of our skill sets are different on a team. So the same thing, like when we think about it as team, and how do we interact with the other half of our team, being the public? I mean, that's where you really make a lot of amazing things happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm glad you mentioned communication too, because I was recently speaking to a chief who said that he believes the power of communication is probably your most powerful weapon in your tool belt.
I think
because
so.
It's your ability to communicate, right? And you can do a lot of things if we can communicate with another person.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're on an island by yourself, and what do you get done there? And it's technically nothing, because you're not doing it in a vacuum.
To go back, you reference, I know the example quarterback, you reference the defensive lineman. Did you play sports at all growing up? I know it's an academic focus, but was there a sport component to you as well?
No, I did not. That's why anyone that knows me will be like, why is he making sports analogies? I did not play sports ball. I was raised to play piano. Like the stereotypes were true for me, a lot of them. So like being intrigued in athletics, let me rephrase it to like athletic ability and fitness. Like that was a way later. That was like basically college into policing, and then really finding the need for that. That's a huge passion of mine, health and fitness, nutrition, out of the need to be like your best, robust, adaptable guy or gal that can chase down somebody and wrestle them into submission if you have to, but then also recover and be durable. But no, as a kid, I was like the stereotypical, like scrawny, shy, like little Asian kid that just hit the books really hard. So no, but I am fascinated with like competition because of that ability, right? Like, so I've come to really appreciate sports, although I'm not avidly following most, but I do dabble in where I get really in the weeds of like watching something. For a while it was MMA, and then it was like the Olympics, and it's on and off because I am fascinated with human potential, but also like from a leadership perspective, sports psychology and what coaches can do, different coaching personality types can do for different teams, because it is back to exactly what you highlighted, right? Like communication. You have no coach. You have these like top tier athletes. Are they going to get the job done? And oftentimes, no, not without leadership.
Yeah, there's a lot of sports examples out there of where the best player doesn't always win, but the best team wins, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And usually you hear you can't have great coaches without great players. Well, that is comparatively true. A great coach, though, and we tailor that wording, great coach being a great leader, can get a group of individuals to work together to achieve an individual team goal, which I think is always impressive. And you see it across all different spectrums in sports and out of sports.
Yeah, for sure. Even solo sports, right? It shows the power because, like, it's trainers, it's the coach. It's like, let's say it's a shot put thrower. Like, someone outside of that shot put thrower's body is telling and able to build on what they know about them, what they know about what's going on with their body, what they're observing in real time, to talk through it, right? It's not just like you're just not just going out there by yourself. And there's a lot. NASCAR driver, like, there's a lot of this crew like working alongside you. So it is all to say that we don't get much done alone. Policing is not a solo sport, although the old school archetype, like, it felt like that at times, especially in small rural communities. But even then, you're running your lap, you got your baton, you got to pass it to the prosecutor, you got to pass it to your supervisor, right? All these types of things.
Those parts will go back to a skill set you mentioned, though, is your writing ability. That articulation that you can probably put in your police reports makes them sound, so when it does get passed off to the prosecutor, now their case is a little stronger because of what you did on your steps, right? So the artistic side does have a strength for you in policing as well, because again, if the documentation is not there, if it's not prepared properly, the case isn't as strong. You're basically possibly apprehending that criminal anyway, but you could be reapprehending them just simply because the case fell apart due to poor evidence collection, poor documentation. And I think those are probably more challenging for you guys than anything else, to know that you did everything and then an I wasn't dotted and the case is gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real thing. It generally happens with newer officers. It's not to poo-poo newer officers. You're just learning a lot. But also it happens with like seasoned officers, just literally not crossing the T's or filling out the field, the paperwork the best way. Like, yeah, a judge will release them. And it's not to point fingers at a judge, but they're looking for this thing that is a requisite that we all know and we train. But if you don't check that box that you have an objection to community release, with how they're trying to triage things, like they will release that person, and now you got to track them down if you can. Of course, there's a lot of methods to do that, but how the personnel and the bandwidth, and it's easily avoidable. But if we slow down and we focus on quality, I mean, that's such a thing.
Yeah, I knew an officer who used to, after every traffic stop, would write on the back of the ticket some notes. And I asked him why he put the notes on the back of the ticket. Yep. And he said, because I need my copy. So if I go to the court, I can remember the specifics of the interaction that took place.
Have to, yeah.
And again, it wasn't it was simply, even for, I say it's simple as a traffic stop. Not that traffic stop is simple, but showing up to court for a traffic stop, even that, just trying to have the documentation notes accurate, those doesn't get tossed.
Yeah. If you go to court as an officer, you will not regret writing more than you thought you needed. Because generally, whatever you go to court on, my experience having gone a lot through the years, a variety of cases, there's a lot of cases where I looked at it and I'm like, this is all I wrote? Seriously? Dang it. And this is pre-body cam. So, which is also a tool. It's not the tool.
Right. But let's go into the personal side of things. I know we'll want to get into some of the health and wellness a little bit later on in this, but there's a lot of things that society experiences that officers experience, and it's not within the uniform, but it happens to you outside the uniform. Can you share a personal, maybe a challenge or personal struggle that you've gone through during your life that you think others can relate to?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we're going to go totally out of the uniform, and the reason why I make that distinction is like, there's so many things that happen in the uniform that like absolutely transcend in the uniform, right? But they affect, like, you're the person, you have a job and you wear the uniform X number of time, like X amount of time, but then you don't just like get to wash that off. There is a method and a use to some level of compartmentalization, but it's not fully possible to do like 100%.
Right.
And there's some downstream consequences if you try. But all to say, yes, a lot of stressful things in the job, like physical danger, but also administrative stress and like logistical things, getting sued, getting investigated for, discipline stuff. Like that's just stuff that happens in the job that I've personally felt. And it absolutely affected like, my headspace at home. And so that's just a fact. But, I think one of the things that comes up for me that is definitely a pillar, I suppose, of like how I build my life or how I try to live my life is like, my relationship with my dad. And growing up in a pretty disjointed home, it's a lot of, I think, like if I was to psychoanalyze, it's a lot of why I became a cop is because I had this really tenuous, at times terrible or non-existent relationship with my dad growing up. So I think, in today's society, and I've said this numerous times, and I'm not the only person saying it, like, there's a lot of people with way more awesome degrees than mine that in the space or various spaces that recognize that as a society, we have a gap of a lot of men not stepping up. And that can be seen in some traditional ways, that can be seen in some non-traditional ways. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of fatherless young men out there. And I'd make the distinction of gender because it does appear statistically from my knowledge that men will do some more volatile, reckless things without proper guidance and community, whereas women don't tend to do those things. And that's from psychologists and sociologists and all that. So it is to say that was a very foundational part of my life, trying to come to grips with that and trying to navigate like what it is to be a man and how to show up. And it's not just to be strong where, I wanted to be a cop in some ways to like prove that I could do the manly thing, but also that's like all the things that most of us, and I think most relationship will realize, is that yes, like being a man or being just an upward adult, they're synonymous is like being kind, being responsible, looking out for others. And there's a lot of ways that that can take form. It doesn't have to be this archetypical like protector in society. But for me, that was the thing. So I think growing up, especially like with a cultural divide, growing up pretty traditionally, having that gap and then navigating that was difficult. But what I will say too is that even with a gap of electing not to talk to my dad for like 8 years, with him continually reaching out, just because I just felt like there was this tear and it wasn't serving me, and I didn't want to. I was so upset and angry, like I was an angry young man about how I perceived things and how my mom was treated and what she felt going through that. But to come full circle and be able to reconcile and forgive him and make amends before he passed, I think that is something I'm actually really proud of, that I've had a lot of personal conversations where I shared about, because it's not an uncommon situation, unfortunately. And I would never presume to tell or encourage someone to do something because it worked for me, but I found so much release in help in how I look at life, like these struggles and adversities. What's in the past is in the past. It's easier said than done to move past it. But to really come to a place with a lot of work and attention and reflection to look back and say like, yeah, I'm glad that I was able to repair that and move on, move up, move forward. That's something that I think was a skill or muscle that was built that will help me and has helped me through a lot of other challenges that are inevitably going to keep coming.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning, Eric, that you were able to reconcile before passing, because I think that's so important, because that thought of not being able to and then never being able to after the fact would eat at you probably longer at that point. Yeah, and there was I'm glad you reflect on that, because I'll admit it did feel a little selfish, and I think that's okay, right? It's okay for me, it was okay to recognize, man, I don't want to regret this later, and that serves me. But that we are us, right? And then also one I guess mental challenge that helped me was, I wasn't a dad, but I always wanted to be a dad. Part of my story, and I am now. But I remember being in that time of like feeling really torn. Should I not? Like, should I go see him? I don't know. You really messed things up. But I'll just say, like, what if? I think what I'm getting at is empathy and trying to see things from his perspective. Like, he was, on his way out, and if there's anything he could do to repair it, he was trying, right? And even if would I give someone like a total stranger an opportunity to have some peace in their passing? I'm like, of course I would. Like, why would I deny that? I was like, okay, do you feel so strongly against your dad that you wouldn't offer that? You wouldn't give that to him? And I didn't feel like that was that anymore, right? I felt like the younger angry man had grown out of that or away from that. But also it was like thinking about, okay, regardless of the situation, everyone makes mistakes. And what if I find myself in a position where one of my loved ones, who I was imagining was like a future child, I was like, if my future child, for whatever reason, I misstepped, or I was misperceived, or I just messed up, and what would I give, right, for that opportunity to apologize and make amends? I'm surely I would give anything, but to be denied that, I was like, man, why would I want to do that? So it was a strange, I don't know if that's a common thing, but it was a flip that helped me with that process. No, and I think that's a very valid point. I think it's actually something for many to think about, because oftentimes we've all had a grudge held against us or against somebody, right? Or that feeling. And that selfishness of getting away is saying, I don't want to be the one to back down. I don't want to be the one to give in.
Yeah.
But we always hear the expression, it takes the bigger person to do it, but it's easier said than done. But the perspective you put on that, would I give this grace to another person? If I was in these shoes, how would I handle it? You basically put yourself in your dad's shoes to see how he may have been acting. And then also you thought about your future self and how you would feel about it. So I think that says a lot about you, and be able to not necessarily self-reflect, but future reflect also. I don't know if that would be the right wording, future reflect, but future state of how
totally
you would
get what
handle
you're
it.
saying. And you're right. I think in that time of life also was a lot of emotional maturity, truly. I think the ability to empathize, it's a common conversation, especially in today's society, but also in policing. But earlier, whether it was my dad or other people, like extreme judgment, right? I came in and I had the job and the oath and the training and the weapons and the tools and the law in a lot of ways, right? And as a 21, 22-year-old, right? I'm hit the street as a 22-year-old. Like, sure, I experienced some hardship. Sure, I was pretty mature for my age and I was pretty responsible. I stayed out of trouble, pretty sharp kid. But like that's a lot of responsibility, and I had this like drugs are bad, what are you doing, this judgment, whereas like through the years and seeing a lot of things and reflecting a lot and trying to personally grow, I recognize like I don't know that person's situation other than like this moment. I can see the track and I can see all these things, but also like I could easily gotten mixed up with the wrong people, being a latchkey kid with my mom working so hard, long hours. Like if I just didn't obey, if I didn't just stay at home and do what I was supposed to do, or stay at school and do what I was supposed to do, like how different things could be. And that's not to excuse bad behavior. I think that's where a lot of cops and just law-abiding civilians get frustrated at times. It's not to excuse bad behavior. But in the case of my dad, and this is part of my story, right? Like my respect for authority and appreciation for our country, despite the divisiveness and the noise, is like both sides of my grandparents fled communist China, and they're fleeing prison or they're fleeing for their lives because they worked in tandem with the nationalist government, right? Like, and I know how most Americans feel about like actual true like totalitarianism or communism, like. And so that's part of my story. That's why I'm even here. That's why I exist, and that's why I was born here. I won as a lot of people say, like the birth lottery to be born in the States in a lot of ways. And my grandparents like left everything behind, right? To be an affluent, like I can't imagine that, right? I'm upper middle class guy, family, house, savings, retirement. Just be like, nope, you're done. Start over because it's your life and your kid's life. But my dad was ditched. Like my grandpa like worked for the government, so he's like peace. My dad was like a young teenager, and he almost starved to death. He was trying to navigate through the Chinese countryside to like some distant family that would take him in, and he survived. And so his story is one of survival. And like, did he have the tools and the example, the modeling to be a supportive dad? Like, absolutely not, right? And he did not carry any resentment. Like, I remember asking him about it when I was actually a pretty young adolescent, and I was like, "Are you mad?" He's like, "Why would I be mad? He did what he had to do." And so to think about that later as an adult, to be like, that is his honest perception. He's just kind of grateful they still had a relationship, right? It was kind of the obligation as you take care of yourself, you survive, and then family otherwise. I know so many people would be like, no, like it's over my dead body, like my kid goes first, right? Like if you have a life raft, like you're throwing the kid on there, and your loved ones, and you might be last. It's kind of that parental thing, but it made me like release this blame and judgment in a lot of ways, because I'm like, man, like you didn't have it better, and generational trauma or whatever it is, like I feel confident that it's I'm able to kind of orient things with the partnership of my wife, like here and now. So I feel really proud of that, but I also appreciate like what he tried, and I think it's helpful. It might be hard at times, whether it's a family member or like someone in the community doing some really awful things. There is that segment that's like truly awful evil, but I think the majority of people that are misstepping, it's like they're kind of doing what they know, and out you take a step back. A lot of people that aren't doing great, but they're not doing terrible things, are like they're kind of doing the best they know how. It's not to say they can't get better, and it takes ownership in them trying, but it's certainly like I think a less corrosive attitude to try to take on.
I think what you mentioned a few moments back too is a lot of the individuals, again, are fatherless. Mm-hmm. And if it's not fatherless, they don't have a parental figure even guiding them, possibly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of things I want to touch on. I know you put a lot of information on your website, which we'll cover in a moment too, and you put your blogs out there. You mentioned the most powerful women in your life. Mm-hmm. You've alluded to your mom working jobs in this, and you mentioned being married now. You care to share with us about how important those influence of your mom on your life, and then now your wife is your partner as well?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And it's like the team, but as much as like the vacancy of my dad and my mom trying to like keep the boat steady, it's kind of this impossible job to navigate. Just like truly, you can't like insulate, your kids from everything. And if you have that kind of discord in home, like it's, as much as she tried to, navigate it, like she did the best she could. And to say that like how hard she worked and the opportunity she provided us, how hard she pushed us, like my sister and I, like it was because like she wanted us to have every opportunity available, right? And hard work can get you a lot of places. And so, as I reflect on taking a non-traditional career path, not wanting to do the corporate, rat race as I kind of feared, but also like the grind. I just wanted to do something that's meaningful. As I reflect back, and you talked about my career, and some of my friends have noticed, like my career. I suppose like the things I've taken on and challenges or roles, and then starting also, as you mentioned, like my online presence and social media and the podcast. Like it's all a lot, and I'm at this point where I have to question like what is this all for, and is it enough? And I think it is a lot of like grind, right? It's like that teaching of like you got to work hard. You're not going to just do something to do something. And there is a toggle. I think it's great, but I think it needs boundaries. It needs a ceiling. It needs these kind of guardrails that I like to talk about and reflect on. So, but yeah, I absolutely appreciate, my mom. Like I think that, the dovetail, talking about fatherless or just people missing that parental figure. A lot of times it's because there's a parent or a guardian that's just like, they're just trying, they're working long hours, whatever. Like they have to make up the gap. And then so you have that time intention gap. And then there's so many people that just step up in that role. Teachers, coaches, friends, parents, right? Like, and I had a lot of that, like friends, parents, as far as like just being around the right kind of healthy circles. I'm extremely grateful for that. I, think about, I wasn't just like at home as a latchkey kid forever, but like, no, but to have positive influences, through other people's parents and dads, parents of both genders, but like really to see what like a quote unquote healthy household can look like. Like you got to see it somewhere. And maybe it's a little bit on like a sitcom on TV. It's an example of what's possible, but then so much more powerful when you actually, you're sleeping over, you're having dinner and breakfast with this family, you see how they interact, how they bicker, but how they resolve. Like you need to know it's possible. You need to see how it could be done so you can do it similarly or take a twist on it. So yeah, absolutely. My mom, like I reflect on it every now and then, and recording like kind of right after Mother's Day. But I mean, I wouldn't have anything good in my life without my mom having put herself out there and self-sacrificed. And a lot of times like parents can do like their own happiness for their kids. And then with my wife too, like we were raised both very differently, but to come in aligned, and I mean differently in that like neither of us want to repeat our childhoods for our kids. And that's not to say like not to blame or shame, but not the kind of environment, again, like my wife family had their own version of like needing to work and navigate these things. And whereas I was like under the, the strong thumb of like, control and pushing academically, my wife was raised more, kind of just loose and independent. And so to meet in the middle and try to build this partnership for how we raise our kid, like that's our intention, right? And so I highly appreciate, I mean, she's been through a lot with me. We got together, I was already a cop. We knew each other before from school and mutual friends, but I mean, she was there standing on the back deck when I was like getting driven home after my shooting and my arms all wrapped up in bandages from second-degree burns. Like that's I can't relate to that. Like I can perceive maybe what that feels like, but I can't truly know how that feels to call. Like I think I texted her, hey, like something happened at work, I'll be late and I'm okay. Like just to get that text that's supposed to be like, hey, it's okay. Like how jarring and terrifying it must be to get that text.
Yeah.
And then to call me when I'm at the hospital and I'm talking to the nurse, and I've shared this before, it's been a while since I said it, but recommendation to other people in this scenario, just, now we have this feature where you can hit like, hey, sorry, I can't talk right now. Like do that. But I didn't have that feature back then. I said to my buddy, hey, can you answer the phone? Just tell her I'm busy, right? Like she already knows I'm at the hospital, and now, you're calling your loved one and they don't pick up the phone. It's their friends awkwardly saying, hey, he's right here. He's okay. Like, no, I just call back later. So little lessons learned. I can only imagine how terrifying and jarring that was, to navigate this. Like, yeah.
And the
something
point you
terrible's
mentioned too
happened. Yeah.
is like you said, you living the experience is very different than her just getting a text message or a phone call, right? And I think that's oftentimes when, if it's military, if it's, policing, the spouse is just as much in the career almost as the professional who's in it, but from a different angle, right?
Yeah,
they live
more
everything.
So too, because we have the control. We can see it, we can process it, and they probably, whether it's a dispatcher or your spouse, like they can't see it. And so where does our mind go? Generally the worst.
The worst
place.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you knew your wife earlier, when in college and mutual friends, but do you remember your first official date?
Yeah. I remember my first official date was, I thought it was like going to be a date. It was summertime, going to the local kind of lakeside park close to where she lived in Seattle. And lo and behold, there's 5 of her other friends there. I'm like, oh, it's that kind of. So we go in friend zone right away. And it wasn't really that. It was just that's what they were doing. But then it's one of our closest friends that actually married us. She was like that friend that just like turned it on. Like, we knew each other, but not really. It was just like, the questions like rapid fire of like kind of interrogatory, right? Like, what are your intentions, my friend, kind of thing. But just like picking my brain and really getting the grill, and I'm good with it. I like to think I'm a pretty laid back person, but to get the report back later that it was a gleaming report card, right, from that kind of protector involved friend. I'm like, yeah, that's cool.
It's
fine. I have nothing to hide.
But you still married her, so it all worked out.
It worked
the question:
out,
how did you propose? What was the proposal like?
Man, so she was working for this retail company. She was like a store manager. That was a lot of her base. It was like retail coming up in that. And then there was this opportunity for her to get into the corporate side and training, and that was like a huge passion of hers. But that job was in LA. So she's mulling this thing around, and we were already living together. I was canine, right? We had the 2 dogs, the house. And I was like, you got to do it. And she's just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you got to do it. Like this, we're young. We don't have like, kids yet. Like this is the time. And we'll work it out. And in the time, like this was like post shooting, like I already had it in my mind, like I need to propose to this girl. But in hindsight and kind of revisiting, she was just like, I guess we're tabling this engagement thing, like she thought like, okay, like and she was always career driven. And in some ways we joke about how I domesticated her, right? Cause I had the dogs and the career and the, and kind of locked down, living in the suburbs, and pulled her out of, Seattle life. But she was just like, okay, like she appreciated it. And we got her all like boxed up and moved out. And then on my first visit, like it was like the following week or two, my first visit, like I already had the ring, like all dialed in, and she was doing some work stuff, and we were, we had the evenings free. And so it was actually, on the rooftop of her LA, like kind of, extended stay or whatever corporate housing that they gave her, for the initial stint, like just this innocuous kind of thing where she did not see it coming at all. I proposed, gave her the ring, in the night sky, and she just starts crying. She's, we're both criers at times, but she says like, why did you let me move here? And I was like, if I had proposed, like you wouldn't have done it, and you need to do it. I feel like, kind of a nod to what we're talking about before, like our loved ones make so many sacrifices, and oftentimes, yes, there's support, but it's not like most of our loved ones would elect for us to choose this job. Like, let's be real. Like, there's pride, there's support, there's love, there's that feeling of like, yeah, you got to do this thing. It's an important thing. But most of my true belief is most loved ones are reluctant, but supportive. I think most first responders, if they're like, hey, you know what? It's been 5, 10, 15 years. I want to go to this more like safe job, right? This more like, whatever different industry. I think most loved ones would be relieved, and I know my wife would be relieved. Even though I'm largely at a desk, she sees how like the stress affects me. And it's less worrying about my physical well-being, but it's like now I have, 35, 40 people under my command that I feel personally responsible, as I should. And I hear their voices, and I hear them going to some of these sketchy calls on the radio, like, or I review it after the fact, and I know they're actually okay, but I watch the camera and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm glad they're okay. Like that could have been bad. Like you
Yeah.
feel that that's a real visceral thing. But all to say, that was the proposal. Luckily, the 2 year thing became a 1 year thing. We got her back before too long. But talk about adversity. Like no doubt, we knew during it was making us stronger. Um, and we look back and we're like, in a lot of ways, like that was great that we were able to grow through that.
And I think it also, like you said, had you proposed 2 weeks earlier, she doesn't move. And
Yeah,
how
yeah,
different things for her, because being there, the empowerment she got from it, being able to have the opportunity to do something she always wanted to do,
hmm
also never has her thinking, 5 years later, 6 years later, I wonder if that would have been like, I wonder if I really would have enjoyed that.
hmm
You gave her the opportunity to fulfill something she really wanted to do. And like you said, it made you guys stronger. That distance, again, absence makes the heart grow fonder, they say, right? But
hmm
that strength that you guys cultivated in the relationship from being a distance apart led to where you are now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a forge, right? And so it's like it can make the heart grow stronger, or if not well attended to without the right practice and intention, like then it doesn't, right? And then it
yeah,
dissolves. I think we all have either in a personal or like other, you know, relationships in our circles, like we know that to be true. But I think when you want it bad enough and you're aligned, then whether it's a romantic relationship or work dynamics or projects, like yeah, you can make it happen.
yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned the stresses of the job and the work, but what are some things that you do to help relieve, like when you're on your day off? What
hmm
is a day off? Well, what is a fun thing you do on your days off with you and the family or you yourself? And then what is something you do also in that time off to try to, like I said, relieve some of that stress?
Yeah, a lot of things. My go-to for years for the job stressors was physical fitness, right? Like just lifting weights and getting in the zone. Like I love this thing I heard a long time ago, but it was like when you put heavy weight on your back, or you're doing a squat, or you're doing a bent, you're under a bunch of weight, you're trying to move this, like you have to be present. And there's the same kind of nod from a totally different direction of like yoga. Why a lot of people love yoga, and I'm not an avid yogi, but I see the benefit and I have experienced it at volume at times. But yes, like when you're present, then you can truly decompress. I'm a type of person that is usually needing to do something and or needing to think about or read or listen to a podcast, and not super long ago that was basically all waking hours I was learning or trying to do something. And it's like I can now reflect for me, and I think most people, like there is a too much, right? There's law of diminishing return. There's also like sometimes you just need less noise. And so for years it was just like heavy weights, but with high stress, low rest, like that's not always the solution. Oftentimes that can exacerbate things. So I will say like activity, movement is a requisite for me daily. And it might be 20 push-ups and that's all I got that day, or I walked the dogs for 10 minutes. But now it's more of like things that can enhance presence, in my opinion, which is, you know, leave the phone in your pocket, or better yet, bonus is like if you can leave it at home, just walk around your neighborhood 10 minutes, right, with the dogs. Listen to the birds, feel the breeze. Like these mindfulness kind of practices are huge, and it helps me be more mindful, like with my family. So my daughter's young, she just turned 6, and so there's this padding where like we get time. I usually get a lot of time before anyone wakes up, and then I have some time with my wife after we put our kid to bed. And how do you maximize that time, with when my kid's awake and she's not at school? So it is like doing the simple things. Like I loved drawing when I grew up. And then when she does art, right, coloring, like you're just kind of there. You're just in it. You can focus on your thing, getting the lines, like something like that. Kind of surprisingly, like it shouldn't be surprising, but it has been kind of therapeutic just to like draw this thing alongside my kid, like compare what we drew. So those little things, absolutely, as you nod to, like spending time with my family, trying to keep enough, energy for me and my wife, because that's a struggle I think for a lot of relationships. Like, you finish your workday, you manage the kid, right? You figure out the bedtime process and all that, and then you're kind of zapped. And then is the TV couch, like, is that quality time or not? It depends. But trying to just have conversations and work through that or work on that to make sure it's not just passively like, this is what we do on autopilot before we go to bed. I think that's a real struggle for a lot of people, but we're not immune to it either.
Yeah, I think, the thing with children, I know with my children too, I try to keep in mind, and it's a struggle. They don't have the concept of time that we do.
Mm.
We know we have to leave in 10 minutes, and they're having a wonderful time. We're like, hurry up, get done. We're trying to get them done because we have to leave.
Yeah.
But in their mind, leaving in 2 minutes makes no difference in their life. They're like, if I leave in 2 minutes or leave in 5 minutes, I'm having fun. And to stop the child from having fun, you don't want to do it, right? You want to have your child immersed in what they're doing, having a great time. And it is, I think, a struggle with that too, because we work on a timetable, and most times children don't. Their concept of it is just different than ours. And their we are the only. They don't have an obligation to anything, so to speak, right? They don't have a job to go to. They have school to go to, but we take them there. If they're late to school, it's either us or the bus.
Right.
So, they're usually not the slow ones getting ready and whatnot. But, you mentioned a couple other things that you do outside. So you founded Blue Grit Wellness, and you also have the Blue Grit Radio podcast. Like I said, health and wellness is important to you. So can you tell us more about the podcast itself?
Yeah. Yeah, the podcast was really born out of hopping on another podcast. Shout out to Ken at the Police Applicant Podcast. But when I was in recruiting as a sergeant and hiring manager with my recruiter, we were just trying everything, as I kind of alluded to before. It felt like an impossible job to me, but we needed it more than anything, as everyone did, or maybe still does need that push and trying to recover their staffing after record attrition. But then just trying to share story and share positivity, right? And so we talked about our department and what the job has meant to us, and trying to engage with people at a different format. And then we realized shoot, I could start my own. And my boss was supportive of that. It was mine, but it was supportive of utilizing that for recruiting purposes. And so it was sharing story, just how do we streamline this, just to talk about the profession. At the same time, I'd already been running Blue Grit Wellness largely as social media and the website, a blog that you mentioned, which is less blog now, more newsletter, and the social and the podcast. But all to say, it was these things that I was passionate about and things that were positive that I felt are something that we can all grasp and just slowly and better ourselves in our community through our departments, right? So that's personal health. That's not just physical fitness and all that. That's really where Blue Grit started, was fitness, nutrition, mental health awareness, and destigmatization, peer support stuff. But then really that bled into leadership. That bleeds into police culture and training and all of these things that we're trying to get better at. So the podcast is all that, right? It's police culture, mindset, just how do we elevate ourselves as better cops. And also, there's plenty of listeners that aren't law enforcement. Some are military and some just aren't at all, but they resonate with the first responder community and what we can do to support, but also just, it's kind of what better proving ground than this really high stress environment, right? So people have high stress careers of all types, but the lessons learned from policing can be translated to help anybody, right? So oftentimes I talk about policing because it's what I know, but the takeaways are there. I have a buddy that has been in kind of the trucking industry and management, and this last episode about purpose and kind of this mid-career rut that a lot of us, or midlife rut, I don't want to say crisis. I think it's usually just a reorientation or a pause, but he's there, right? So he had all these reflections he was sharing with me about listening to that. So that's really where it's at. It's just trying to be positive, for the broader community outside of just me and my circle, but outside of just my department, just trying to further these positive conversations so we can all get better.
I say congratulations actually on the podcast as well, because I think just a few short weeks ago you eclipsed your 200th episode.
Yeah. I think the time airing now we're at 215 or so. So yeah, it's a lot, as you know. It's a lot of time and work and love and grind, but it's meaningful. It's been an interesting journey for sure.
And you mentioned the importance of health and wellness, and it's not just for members of the policing and law enforcement community. Can you tell us why you believe health and wellness is so important for individuals, just your personal experience from it?
Yeah, absolutely. It governs everything. What is it that you intend to do here on this earth in the time you have? And I don't think it's lost on anyone. We think we just kind of shovel it to the side, but your ability, so your physical body and its ability, and it's it is the vehicle that your mind, your soul, what have you, what you believe is navigating through this world, this life. you got to take care of it or it won't take care of you. Same with your mind, right? Like there's brain health, but there's mind health, and there's a difference there that is kind of fun, and I'm trying to explore that more. But like, how are we staying sharp so that we can be capable to do the things? How are we emotionally regulated, right? Like you talked about de-stressing. You can do all the things you want to do, but not if you're maintaining this vehicle, right?
Right.
It's like the classic adage of like redlining the car. You can have a performance vehicle, right? But if you're not actually taking care of the maintenance, like that thing's gonna be a clunker and it's gonna be useless, even though it's like a $200,000 car. But if you have your good old reliable like Honda or Subaru, but you're actually doing all the oil changes and you're like checking the tire like levels, like those things can drive a long, long time. You take care of them. So it is just a nod to like that is your ability to optimize and live the life you want the best way that you want to live it.
Excellent. Appreciate that. You mentioned peer support also, though, and you're a peer support coordinator with your department, destigmatizing mental health. There's a lot around that going around the country now, the department. You're doing a significant amount with that. I think you're on the forefront of a lot of areas through the podcast, your mission yourself. Can you tell us how it's impacting your department, and also even how you're seeing those impact around the country, how peer support coordinators are making a difference?
Yeah. So I think like there's peer support, which in different states there's like different kind of legislation and awareness of like it's essentially like some protection of certain types of speech, right? So if I went to a stressful call and I'm like, man, like that really messed with me. My sleep was messed up. Like the purpose is kind of that like the person I tell, if they're peer support designated, generally like they can't be compelled to talk about it. So if you think about the old school, like maybe not so positive management, like the captain or the assistant chief can't be like, hey, I heard like Tung was kind of stressed about it. Is he not capable of working? Like it's nothing to do with that, right? It's just I was just sharing a thought. But with peer support, like literally that boss cannot ask my peer, my buddy that I confided in. So it is like this other layer, this other tool. Therapy is a tool, mindfulness is a tool, peer support's a tool. Going to an inpatient treatment for trauma is a tool. Also, like religion or faith for a lot of people is a tool, right? And physical fitness is a tool. So it's all to say like it's one more tool. So beyond like the officialized peer support, I want to talk about just this culture of peer support, which is that even if you don't have protected speech or protected, I think language, like it's this notion like we gotta check in with each other, right? So that's civilians. That's not just like, hey, how are you? Hey, like you good? Which I think is a start, and it could be a healthy part of a culture. But when someone's just seeming off, maybe it's your buddy and you see him every other week, but he's off, you say, hey, you seem off. Is there something going on? Something you want to talk about? Something you want, like, it's just being more direct and caring about that. Like the worst case scenario is someone gets put off and later they're like, oh, he just cares, right? And generally if someone's really put off, then maybe something is going on, or why would we be so reactive? So all to say it's like more of the culture. And when you ask about, at my department, having been wearing a peer support hat for years and years and years and just kind of doing these check-ins, and sure, it's part of the culture, but really feeling at times when my voice was off, right, on the radio, and having my buddy like really call me aside and be like, hey, when are you, like, let's link up over here, like meet me in this lot. And I was kind of annoyed by it, right? But he recognized like something had happened, and it's not like I put out on the radio that I almost got hit by a car, but he could tell something was up. My sergeant didn't pick it up. He's kind of like, oh, you're good, cool. Not blaming the sergeant, but this was
Right.
my buddy that like we hung out a ton together. He knew me, and so like he picked
He
it
could
up.
detect that something was off.
Yes, yeah, and that buddy's Diego. He's a buddy that we lost in the line of duty, and he's a lot of the reason why I do a lot of this. But it just made me feel peer support on a different level when like someone was able to check on me because they truly like saw me and knew me. But also beyond that, it's like one of my prouder moments, and moments there's a lot like this where I'm in a roll call or briefing, whether it was as a sergeant or now as a commander, and people are talking about a call where there's like a really kind of heinous crime kind of thing, and on their own, unprompted by me, but there's a 10, 15-year officer that's in there and being like, yeah, dude, that was really messed up, and I'm going to talk to my therapist about it. I got I got an appointment on Tuesday. Hey, and you young guys on the other side of the room, like, if you don't have a therapist, set one up, right? It's all the things we try to say organizationally, but it means so much more from quote unquote peer, like the same level, someone that's been there, done that, and doing it still. That's like, hey, no shame, and actually, it's the opposite of no shame. It's actually like a badge of awareness, responsibility. Like, hey, I just show up better when I can talk to a professional, offload this, because my wife is not my therapist, and I've played that game, and I still do, right? I vent a lot, we share, but there is a point where that's not constructive, and they're just trying to listen and help you, but you literally have this vocation of professionals that go through a lot of training, a lot of experience to help you through this thing, whether it's you're getting IA'd or whether it's, you're getting sued, or whether it's like, you were in a pursuit and you almost got T-boned, and you're trying to navigate that because you feel like your life just flashed before your eyes. Like, these are all real things. So all to say, I think that's the culture of peer support that I am truly most proud of, is just when you see it working, and you hear someone went to a child call or something, maybe, she, she's trying to get pregnant with her husband, and she's just a coworker, right? But like, people are aware, and they're trying to show support, and the person, the team members feeling that support. I think that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, and I think, the part that you mentioned, individuals, I mean, we always want the leadership to reflect the culture that we want everyone to follow. But we know, just in general, law enforcement, there's still a large portion of the population that has some of that old school mentality. And that's just what it is. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? But when the peers can look to another one and empower them to seek support, now that individual knows that it's a part of a we culture. We together in this, in briefing, are all able to move forward. And now that power in numbers, now you have 10, 15, 20 people in a briefing room that all feel we can do this. Mm-hmm. And versus if one person might think it's the wrong thing to do, 20 of us believe it's the right thing. I think that helps. And like I said, and people want to be a part of something. And when officers can feel they're a part of a bigger picture and they're all seeking help, and again, it's not a negative. We all need support in different areas. And so I think that's awesome. Like I said, the fact that they did that without you prompting anything, and they looked to the other person next to them and suggested it, is really cool. And especially for young officers, you're not rookies, starting early rather than waiting 5 years later until they start to feel that burn, or maybe in their first year. And unfortunately, it happens early on too, right? Mm-hmm. And we know the consequences that can come of those situations. You mentioned that your buddy who was in construction hit that rut, and he, from the podcast. I think it's safe to say, from everything you mentioned, peer support, though, is not just within, like I said, the policing community, the law enforcement community, but it could be school teachers. It could be individuals working in gas stations. It could be people in warehouses. Any role you work in, any individual can have an off day or something going on that is making them feel a certain way. Mm-hmm. And having those friends and family around you, or those coworkers who recognize that, I think is powerful. So,
100%.
For the individuals who either want to communicate with you about the health and wellness side, what you offer with Blue Grit, what is the best way for them to contact you or reach out to you?
Yeah, for like questions or suggestions on the podcast, I love that. I love feedback, or just kind of Q&A stuff that I can use to help other people. bluegritwellness@gmail.com if email is like your preferred method. If you're on Instagram, I'm pretty active on there. The page is Blue Grit Wellness. And then also LinkedIn. So if that's the platform you prefer, I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Eric Tung, and you'll see me, and you can get a hold of me through there too.
Excellent. We'll be sharing those also in the show notes, so I appreciate you providing them for us. Wrapping up a few things for you. So we talked early on about community and the ratios with your department and the population you serve. What do you think, though, is the best way for the law enforcement community and the community they serve to build a stronger bridge together?
Yeah, I think it's just to stay curious and stay patient, right? Like, so often I've felt this, and I see it all the time with law enforcement. It feels, especially if you let the media get to you, or like the perceptions, social media included, like it feels like it's an us them. It feels like, especially in the last few years, when it got the worst, it was like, okay, you're out here, you're one of them, and you're doing all this bad stuff. But if we apply like patience and curiosity, like that's what gets us to empathy, right? So it's hard just to apply empathy if that's like completely opposite of your truth, right? And I know that your truth can be kind of triggering to some people, but just recognizing that, like, I don't I'll never know what it's like to grow up as somebody else in this lifetime, right? Like I have my life, I have my lens, and your positive lens, right, Scott? Like so, that's where the sharing a story is so powerful for those that are willing to be patient and listen to it. It's not just my story, but it's like whoever's story. It might be your neighbor two doors down. Like, have you had the time to consider like what they may be going through when they're barking at you for something like you left in the street, or your hedges are overgrown, maybe one door down, right? That kind of neighbor dispute that like we might respond to as cops. Have we applied that, right? And so I think a lot of times when we are also patient and curious, then we will seek our own sources. There's so many independent news opportunities these days. There's a lot of efforts I see, like trying to find more unbiased news. Like that's awesome. I just kind of see it in the periphery, not through my job, but just like being on social media. I see like this platform or this site that's like that's their goal. I'm like, great. I think most of us are like kind of closer to the middle than like these extremes that we get fed. But then it feels like, and outside of policing, right? Like some of my most, I think, politically involved or passionate, let's say, friends on both sides of the political spectrum, like they feel like the world is quite different than I feel it is, right? But that, that the fact that we're all really close friends says something, right? And so I think that we're more similar than we are different. So that's like kind of maybe my philosophical, like zoomed out lens on how, the question you proposed.
And I think what you mentioned is very true, because I think all of us have friends on both sides of the spectrum, and yet some of them are our best friends.
Yeah.
And that's because we took the time to know them at either a younger age, or we accepted them and talked to them as people and not about just political views. And it's amazing that, like I said, the country being, we'll just call it split 50-50.
Sure.
Yet we can have friends that are completely different than us, but our country seems to, like I said, the polarizing in the media makes it seem much more extreme. But I think you're right. We probably have many more people in the country toward the middle than the extremes.
Yeah.
Again,
I think the
non-political
our values
topics,
I think you're right, man. It's our values are aligned in our friendships and those that we choose, like our chosen family. So your closest friends, how you're living your life obviously correlates well with how they're living their life, how they're trying to put their energy out. However, with like politics, political systems, government, like that is, creating these systems to like how everyone else should live, or how should we affect that. And that's where the subjectivity just obviously takes off, and like how we should apply these values, because we say we want the same things, but that looks very different. But ultimately, like focusing on what you can control, like for me it's like focusing on relationships and impact of people rather than things. I think that's something that really helps me either in my job or just kind of in my day-to-day.
Yeah, someone once gave me something they made for me years ago. They did pottery work, and it was a little thing to hang on a wall. It says, "Friends are the family you choose."
Yep.
And it always stuck with me. It was like, because family is important to me, but it's unique because some of your best friends are like family as well, right?
Absolutely.
So you'd mentioned, you did better on the fire test than the police test years ago, but now you have an impact on not just policing, but other individuals outside of policing. However, if you had to do it all over again, would you still pursue the career in policing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's too easy to say that you have no regrets, because that's like, oh, I wouldn't do anything different. I would certainly do a ton of things different. I've made plenty of mistakes, miscalculations, misperceptions, and I'll continue to do so. However, like I recognize some of the hardest times in my life have been absolutely a result of policing, the highest amounts of stress and trauma exposure, like absolutely because I chose to be a first responder. But I wouldn't have changed that. I wouldn't change that at all because of my support systems, the people in my life, the kind of wellness, I suppose, routines that have been better and more, I suppose, more regimented at different times in my life have allowed me to stay resilient, right? So that's where blue grit comes from, like this grit and this tenacity to keep like charging forward. With grace, right? Like this, I have my own twist on it. It's not just like to be tough as nails and like charge through, but it's like to keep building. Resilience is a part of it. Like patience is a part of it, but being positive. So although every adversity has been hard, like I believe I've been able to grow through it. And I think that I've been able to grow through it because I believed I could. And so I think just like the biggest, hardest times, losing a buddy in policing, like it was his life and his example and legacy was an absolute gift, and it was able to be magnified in a way when he passed. I would love to have him here, but I can't. So that's the lens I choose to take, and it's a real thing that I feel, and that's just one of the many things of like adversity and just recognizing that we grow from challenge, we grow from hardship, and that's a lot of it is a choice.
And if individuals are interested in learning more about the Diego story, I know you have information about that on your website, and you have, I believe, the video on there. You have a blog on there. You have information written about it, the hats you had made. So even the bracelet you wore, right? I think there's so many things you put in there. So if individuals are interested in learning about that, they should definitely check out the website, because I think you pay a tremendous tribute to him there as well. So I appreciate that. Individuals, are always in the community going about and trying to remain safe. So if you were to offer up a safety tip for individuals, everyday life, should they practice?
Yeah, on that, I guess, like I just kind of said it, but like be curious, right? So we talk about vigilance and we talk about hypervigilance, like being too aware and kind of getting like paralyzed of like what may be around the corner in the shadows. But when we remove judgment from it, it's a shadow. Like, why do I feel uncomfortable in the city going down this dark alley or going past this dark alley? Well, it's because it's the unknown, and also like things could happen in dark alleys. So removing judgment and just being curious of like, why do I feel this way? Listen to that. Listen to your intuition. That's usually rooted in all of your experiences and exposures, and then move past it. Right? There's a reason why you don't want to go down the dark alley. Cool. Walk past it or go around. Like walk on the far side of the street because someone's acting strangely. That's okay, right? Some people might say like, I don't want to judge that person that's acting strangely. I don't want to. Cool. Don't judge them. Just recognize like how they're acting seems a little manic. It seems a little bit like what is the word? It seems like a characteristic of someone that might be under the influence, and like that is just not a comfortable thing for me. So I'm gonna go on the other side of the street, and that's totally okay. But not to be like, oh, I don't want to be judgy, and I'm gonna walk up. What if he like reacts or like lunges at me? You can just avoid it, right? And then just have like safety plans based on your mindset, your training, your physical ability. Do you carry a weapon? Do you not? Do you go strength in numbers? Do you take the well-lit side of the street? I think these are all things that can be stressful for some people to initially think about, but then realize like that is all in the effort and the goal of being more safe. Do I call a buddy and have them on the phone as I'm walking home, or do I have my phone ready, with 911 prepped because this is like kind of a weird thing going on, and I can easily just like turn the phone, like sleep the phone again, right? Put it away if nothing happens, and that's great. Like just to have plans, these contingencies we talk about in police training that are absolutely applicable to everyone. But again, kind of going back to the main thing is be curious, and then you're not going to be, let's say, fearful or too reactive.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And I'd like to say thank you again, Commander Tung, for being on the Getting to Know Your Local Leo episode today. You've shared some personal notes, which I think are important. It lets individuals see that members of the policing community are not much different than them in the walks of everyday life. The information about health and wellness, I think, are essential, not just to those in law enforcement, but outside. Again, with the Blue Grit Wellness, the Blue Grit Radio podcast, you're sharing that message. You're leading the charge, I believe, in an evolution of health and wellness within law enforcement, and the ideas that, again, it is okay. And I appreciate everything you're doing with it, both your daily service as a police commander, but also what you're doing for your fellow officers and the members in the community. So I think they're truly lucky to have someone like you involved in that role. I know you do speaking engagements and whatnot as well, so it's really important. So thank you tremendously for that. For those interested, though, like I said, in learning more about Blue Grit Wellness, the website, bluegritwellness.com, we will have the information, like I said, in the show notes. And so thank you again for joining the podcast today. We look forward to seeing everything you're doing with the podcast and the changes that you're inspiring within your department, and hopefully the country follows.
Yeah, thanks so much, Scott. I really appreciate your time and sharing this place and space. And yeah, on the website, you can subscribe to the free newsletter, and it is geared a bit more towards everybody, right? Just like healthy tips and mindset and summary of the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for the time and your project and what you're doing for the community.
Absolutely. Thank you again, sir. We'll talk again. Take care now.
Thank you.
If you liked this episode, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Provide us your feedback in the comments and leave us a rating or review. We truly appreciate your opinion. And then follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook to get all the latest updates. Remember, you can always find places that will share negative law enforcement news stories, But here, at Your Positive Lens, you will only find your positive law enforcement news stories. Once again, I'm your host, Scott T. Thanks for listening, and we'll capture you on the next Your Positive Lens.